The most poignant cases we had during my time on the bench at the Constitutional Court was the Gauteng Education Bill. We had thought when we drafted the Constitution that the provincial legislatures would give a lot of time to passing laws, but they didn't. But here was the bill, and it had been sent to us, I think, by the Speaker of the Gauteng legislature. There'd been a challenge to provision in the education bill, basically to a clause that said language shall not be used as the basis for excluding anybody from public schools. And the challenge came from organized Afrikaans-speaking groups who said, we need single medium schools to ensure that the Afrikaans language survives. And I remember myself as Albie sitting up on the bench, the anguish of council addressing us. It reminded me of my anguish when the days when I was an advocate, and I felt the future of my client, then it might be a death sentence, depends upon my skill as a lawyer. And I'm feeling his anguish that he feels this isn't just something for a client, this is something for him, for his community, for the world he's grown up in. And I felt I needed to respond. So Arthur Chaskelson asks Ismail Mohammed, brilliant lawyer, strong, quick, deal with it. And Ismail is impatient with the whole thing. You read the text of the Constitution, it's fairly clear, this is now the interim Constitution, on the language that's used, that if you've got the money, you can set up a private school, and it can be a Christian school or Muslim school, a Jewish school, single faith, and it can be a single medium school. But if it's in the public sphere, you don't have the right to have a single medium school if it's going to keep kids out of the school. He writes that judgment just on the text. And I'm feeling we need a much more comprehensive answer, an answer that responds to the anguish of the council who is addressing us. And not just of that council, it's of a community of people with a history and a concern. And I remember pushing my clerks very, very hard to look at international instruments, United Nations dealing with single medium schools and rights of minorities. I remembered work I'd done in London when I had spent time in the library of the Minority Rights Group, who gave us a lot of support in the anti-apartheid struggle. The difference in South Africa was the majority was being treated like a minority, and the minority behaving like a majority. Everything got turned like inside out, upside down. And I felt we needed not just a technical answer, what was the intention of the draft of the Constitution, but what would be right and just in the context of evolving South Africa in relation to the issues. And I wanted to put it on the table in the judgment, first of all, that the fears of Anglicization were based on history, were based on the destruction not only of the independence of the Boer republics by the British, but the enforced policies of Anglicization in the schools. Seeing Afrikaans, then it was Dutch Afrikaans, as some kind of secondary language, and we got to civilize the Boers. And a painful, painful experience of loss of farms and homes and homestead independence, loss of dignity, and loss of language, all kind of going together. And the second element was I'd become very friendly in the 1960s with a group of Afrikaans writers. My portrait was painted by Marjorie Wallace, who was married to Jan Rabie, and while she's painting and talking away, sometimes in Afrikaans with a very strong Scottish accent, he's meeting with André Brink and Etienne Leroux and other writers, and they were such warm people and so kind to me. I'm in and out of jail at a very difficult time of my life, and I knew from other writers, people who were classified as members of the coloured community using Afrikaans for the poetry, people like Jace Gerwel later on at University of the Western Cape, who loved the Afrikaans language and for whom it was a mode of articulation. And thinking about the excitement when the first legal textbook in Afrikaans came out, Die Uitleg van Wette, L.C. Steyn, conservative book, but it was a milestone in kind of the dignity of a community of people. Textbooks coming out, and now D60ers writing rebellious stuff, envisaging a new South Africa in which Afrikaners would play a role in advancing democracy and engaging with democracy. So I mentioned that the Afrikaans language, in my judgment, produced treasure, literary treasure, cultural treasure. It was important to make those points. Counterposed to that, there were black children aching for education. It could be living with their mums and maybe dads in white areas. They're living in the backyards. They're growing up in the servants' quarters. The nearest school is a good school nearby. And the schools are not half empty, but maybe a third empty. So here now you've got children historically have been denied everything. They've lost more than Afrikaners ever lost, and Afrikaners lost a lot after the South African War. And they're aching for education. And the empty school desks and their Bunsen burners and libraries and sports fields, and they told, sorry, go to your own school somewhere else. How do you reconcile the two? And in that context, I felt, certainly given the text of the Constitution then, the rights of the children to education was so powerful that they shouldn't be excluded from the schools. And the schools could carry on teaching in Afrikaans for children who wanted to be taught in Afrikaans. And I must say, looking back now, I think a big opportunity was lost. If that issue had been grasped by the Afrikaans language defenders and say, okay, as long as we can use the language for our kids in schools where the Afrikaans ethos is manifest and so on, we'll welcome these black kids and find a place for them. And we'll be providing the drive, and we were saying, little boy, little girl, you are so welcome in our school, and you can kick a football around together in the playgrounds. You get to meet each other and get to know each other. That's part of your education. It never happened that way. The push was monolingual schools, on the basis the minute you allow English to come in at all, it takes over, it dominates. I can see these issues of being fought out Stellenbosch University. It's undergone an evolution where it's become largely an English language university. It's got people from all over Africa. It's a go-to place for black children. There's a verve and an energy and a brightness there that they like. I'm told the best parties are in Stellenbosch. But it's lost something. I don't know. I don't want to even get there. Lots of people have burnt their fingers in relation to that. But I feel if the Afrikaans medium people, language people, had taken the initiative, run with it, and found a way to get little black kids whose parents knew English, didn't know Afrikaans, the language could have been maintained, and it wouldn't have been seen as a language that's exclusive, that somehow harks back to the idea of exclusion of others. It would be seen as a language that can thrive in a multilingual setting. The second case where this theme cropped up that I was involved in was the Ermelo education matter, and that dealt with the power of the provincial executives versus the power of the school governing body. And the school governing body had gone, I think, for exclusive Afrikaans medium, and the provincial minister for education wanted black children to be allowed into the school, and they didn't know or feel they should be obliged to learn Afrikaans to get there. I remember the case for a number of reasons. One of them was my colleague Yvonne Mogoro. While we were talking, she burst into tears. And we were wondering, and she said, "You know, Albie, I just remembered my school days and how hard it was. How hard it was." But the decision she agreed to was the decision we took, that the provincial executive had been too sweeping in overriding the decision of the school governing board, hadn't given them a proper hearing, had been too autocratic. So in spite of Yvonne now remembering her hard days growing up in Khadashewe, working class area of Kimberley, battling to get through school, father battling to have employment, disappearing under the pass laws and re-emerging afterwards and so on, she put all of that aside to give a principled decision that said that the provincial Minister for Education had been too autocratic in his handling of the matter. But it raised those issues, and those issues are still current in South Africa now. And for me, what do you deal with? There's no irresistible force in the Constitution. There's no immovable object in the Constitution. There are tensions, and the tensions have to be dealt with in a way that is as fair as possible in terms of the value system of the Constitution. In the enforcement of social and economic rights, our court, the Constitutional Court, introduced the notion of meaningful engagement as a very important procedural way of dealing with the claims of the poor, the dispossessed, the homeless, to have somewhere to live, and the claims of landowners and the wish of local authorities to develop and enrich the areas in which people were living, and we introduced the notion of meaningful engagement between the claimants, the homeless, thinking of, well, they must be given alternative accommodation somewhere not in the Kamadulas, but somewhere close to where they lived, they worked, their children went to school and so on. Get it through speaking. We haven't had meaningful engagement in the realm of school governing boards and provincial executives and parents' communities. Unfortunately, the issues have been fought out politically with a lot of emotion, and I'm been off the court for a long time now, so I won't comment on Bella, any of those laws. It's out there. What has been positive in Afrikaans medium schools, public schools, has been to see that Afrikaans speakers from all different communities are there now, and they're very enriched by having pupils now, learners from a much wider range. That's been very positive, and I understand that a number of schools twin with black schools, provide support, interchange, interaction, also very, very positive. But I can't see in principle why that same interaction, interchange couldn't be achieved inside the schools with maybe separate sections. One section English being used, or maybe African languages being used, or maybe combination of English and Sesotho or Xhosa, and another part of the school Afrikaans only. I think that would actually strengthen the survival of Afrikaans, not diminish it. The language now is rich in South Africa because there's a economically developed community that is self-standing. It's not just economic wealth, it's theatre, it's newspapers, it's online programs, it's cultural development that's not dependent upon protection and exclusivity. It's functioning well within a wider universe, and people can hop from one to the other and enjoy them both. It's getting out of the laager and embracing the wider world and moving the wagons away, the wagons of protection. It's risky, and of course it's not my language, it's not my history, it's not my culture. It's easy for me to say, but that's where all my intuitions lie, that an embrace of multilingualism would be the most powerful protection that the Afrikaans language could have, rather than an attempt to maintain foci of exclusivity that somehow is resistant to permeability with the rest of the country.